Okay, great.
All right, folks, we're going to give it a couple more minutes and we'll start around 12:03. Jordan is going to post a link to a PDF version of the presentation that we're going to be giving today in case anyone wants to follow along there. All right, it looks like it's 12:03, so I'm going to get started here. First and foremost, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I know that there's a lot of things going on today that may be distracting your attention, so thank you so much for coming. My name is Ali Swadek. I'm the Director of Policy and Research at the New York City Campaign Finance Board, and I will be your main trainer today. Jordan Pantalone, he's our intergovernmental liaison. He is going to be manning the chat box and also monitoring Zoom. And Amanda Malillo, who is our Deputy Director of Public Affairs, will be answering questions in the Q&A box, as well as elevating your questions that are entered into the box. I also want to start off just by thanking the Board of Elections in the City of New York, particularly Ariel Merkel and her office. She's the ADA coordinator. You'll be hearing from her a bit more later when I turn it over to her to explain the ballot marking devices, because while this is a train the trainer that will explain ranked choice voting in the City of New York for any organizations who are looking to educate their membership about ranked choice voting, today's audience focus is on voters with disabilities. So Ariel will be coming in later to explain what ranked choice voting looks like on the ballot marking device, which we're really excited about. So we're really thankful that they decided that they co-sponsored this training with us. I would also like to thank Disability Rights New York and the Hispanic Federation for promoting the training so that we would have a great turnout. And I would just also like to remind folks that this training will be recorded so we can post it on our website later. With that said, So available, as well as ASL interpretation from Frankie and Felice. So thanks for that. And I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan Novick from the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities to do an accessibility check for us. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining and for committing to understanding more and helping get the word out about ranked choice voting, which is very exciting. Going to do a brief access check here. Just want to make sure I am able to be heard. I'm not speaking too fast. Based on the accommodations, it seems to be working just fine, so that's great. So today, for this presentation and on this webinar, there, as Ali mentioned, is both American Sign Language interpretation and captioning. If you're joining us via Zoom, we do have American Sign Language interpretation. Because this is a webinar, we have discussed amongst the panelists that when someone is not speaking, their camera will be, for the most part, turned off. When someone is, it'll be turned on. This way, the screen real estate will be maximized for the ASL interpreter, making it much easier for anyone who might need it to follow along in the conversation. You don't need to pin, you don't need to spotlight. We have that covered. In addition, we have captioning. If you're once again joining us via Zoom, if you go to the bottom of your screen and select the closed caption or CC button, you can show subtitle if it's not already on, but there's additional settings where you can turn it off if you prefer, you can enlarge it, or you can view a full transcript for context of this conversation. When it comes to engagement, and I leave it to Ali in terms of when questions should be asked, there is the Q&A feature that I encourage you to take advantage of. Putting questions in the Q&A feature instead of the chat makes it much easier for your question to be acknowledged and not lost amongst the sea of other communications that could be happening in the chat. So if you open Q&A, you can enter your question. It will be seen by the panelists, and once it is responded to, you can see the answer, or someone might answer it out loud. In addition, if you would like to speak, I encourage you to raise your hand at the moment. Because this is a webinar, video and audio have been turned off for attendees, but we can turn on your audio if you ask a question. For those of you joining via Zoom, if you press the raise hand button, you will have a little icon that shoots up saying you have a question. Then the panelists will recognize that, give you the floor, unmute you, and you'll be able to ask your question. If you're joining us via phone, don't worry, you can still raise your hand and do that as well. If you're joining us via phone, if you press *9, that's *9, you will have your hand raised, we'll recognize the phone number, we'll give you the ability to speak, and then you unmute yourself by pressing *6. So once again, that is *9 to raise your hand on the phone, and *6 to mute yourself or unmute yourself once you have been prompted to do so. With all of that being said, this concludes our access check, and it's my pleasure to turn it back over to Ali Swadek, the Director of Policy and Research for the Campaign Finance Board. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I actually didn't know that about muting and unmuting yourself on a phone. So it's something you learn new every day. All right, so I'm going to share my screen, which has a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm just going to ask, let's see. Oops. And if someone could give me a thumbs up if they can see my screen. Okay, thank you. All right. So as I mentioned, this is a train the trainer presentation. And what that means is this training is geared for folks who are going to be training their own communities about ranked choice voting. However, if you're a regular voter and you're just curious about ranked choice voting, you will also learn a lot here at this training. I have to say, you may learn more than you bargained for, but you're still more than welcome, and thank you so much for attending. Later on in the training, Ariel Merkel will also describe for folks what ranked choice voting looks like on a ballot marking device. I just want to set some expectations here just so that everyone knows where we're going in this training. So first off, we're going to start with an introduction and some background just to give everyone the lay of the land. Next up, we will get into a bit more detail about what ranked choice voting is, how it works, and the main questions that some voters have. Then, because this is a train the trainer presentation, I'm going to go a little bit more in depth about voter education and why it's important. After that, this isn't on the list, so I just want to highlight it. We're going to turn it over to the Board of Elections to talk about what the RCV ballot looks like on a ballot marking device. And then lastly, I will close out on our best practices, recommendations for communicating with voters, and the CFB's next steps for educating voters. So there's scheduled pauses throughout the training where folks can ask questions. If you have a question that comes up throughout the training, we do ask that you enter questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of Zoom, which is Jonathan described. You just enter your question at the bottom. We'll answer any outstanding questions during the breaks. And then at the end of the training, if you raise your hand and want to be unmuted to ask your question verbally, we will unmute you and answer any questions from the raised hands folks at the very end of the training. All right, so just to introduce myself a little bit more, my name is Ali Sladek. I rejoined the Campaign Finance Board in January of 2020. And originally, this is my second time at the CFB because I worked in the Candidate Services Unit during the 2013 election. Before I came back to the CFB, I was a policy staff on the 2019 Charter Revision Commission. And I didn't know anything about ranked choice voting when I joined on the staff of the Charter Commission. And I learned a lot about it because that was one of the major pieces of the major ballot question that was introduced by them. Okay, and also for those of you who aren't familiar with the Campaign Finance Board, we are a nonpartisan independent city agency that administers the Public Matching Funds Program and engages voters through the NYC Votes initiative. So our work is primarily with partners and volunteers working to inform all New Yorkers so they can participate fully in elections and engage underrepresented communities through outreach. So we rely on community partners very heavily in voter outreach. And the reason why is we believe that on-the-ground organizations are best equipped to talk to their own communities. And our community partners understand how to break down information in ways that will resonate specifically with their neighbors and how to amplify education efforts through person-to-person outreach. So the goals for this training, after you attend, you will understand an overview of ranked choice voting in New York City. You'll understand how ranked choice voting can benefit voters. You'll understand where to find resources and FAQs and how to customize this training for your community, and also best practices for training community members. As I mentioned, you will also know what the ranked choice voting ballot looks like on the ballot marking device. Okay, so to start off, what is ranked choice voting? Ranked choice voting is a new way for voters to elect their representatives. So voters can rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference instead of choosing just one. This gives voters more say in who wins, increases civility, and can lead to more diverse candidates winning. I just want to mention also, I'm going to be abbreviating ranked choice voting as RCV just for the sake of space and so that I can catch my breath. So who uses ranked choice voting? A lot of different states and municipalities across the US. So it's also growing in the United States. It's now used in 19 jurisdictions, and it used to be, it's currently in use in 17 US cities, including San Francisco, Minneapolis, and Santa Fe. But 6 additional cities, including Alaska, voted in 2020 to use ranked choice voting. I will also point out that the Academy Awards uses ranked choice voting to select their best picture winners. So depending on how you feel about their selections in the past, that's just something that's useful to know. So how did we get ranked choice voting in New York City? In 2019, the Charter Revision Commission voted to create ballot question number 1 to establish ranked choice voting in primary and special elections for local office, effective January 1st, 2021. So almost 74% of New Yorkers voted yes on this ballot question. So while 74% of voters voted yes on ballot question 1, There were some areas with less support, and I just want to point those out for awareness for folks who are going to be doing outreach in these communities. The assembly districts, so the map on the screen right now shows the percent of voters who voted yes on ballot question 1 in 2019 by assembly district. This analysis was done by the CUNY Center for Urban Research, so we're really thankful that they were able to give this to us. And the places in red are the places where fewer than 50% of the voters who turned out voted yes. So if you're operating in these communities, this is just something we want to be aware of. You may confront skepticism about ranked choice voting or outright like anger from folks. So just for your awareness. All right, so there are 2 government entities who I will be talking about in this training. First, the Campaign Finance Board, and I already mentioned, we are designated by the charter to conduct a voter education campaign to familiarize voters with ranked choice voting. But we are not in charge of implementing ranked choice voting, administering poll sites, or printing ballots. That's the City Board of Elections job. So we're really excited to be working closely with them on RCV messaging and education and coordinating our campaigns so we make sure we reach the most New Yorkers we possibly can. And they're actually co-sponsoring this training with us today. So we're really excited that they're here too. Here's a cheat sheet for ranked choice voting in New York City. So it's going to be used starting January 1st. We're past that point. It will only be used in special and primary elections, not in general elections. And it will only be used in special and primary elections for the 5 city offices of mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, and city council. So it's not used for federal or state races like president, Congress, or governor. And it's not used in local races like district attorney and judgeships that are not considered city offices. So this last part is important to know because it means that some ballots will have ranked choice voting elections and single choice elections. And what that may look like, for example, in Manhattan, they are electing a new district attorney. That will be a single choice election. And then the races for mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, and city council will appear as ranked choice voting elections on that same ballot. Okay, this leads me into how did we vote for these offices before? So we used to use single choice plurality elections. This means that voters choose only one candidate for each office, and the candidate with the highest number of votes wins. The winner doesn't always receive a majority of the vote, and that's kind of a part of the description. It's a plurality election. So that means that winners could win with less than 50% of the vote. Voters will still use single choice elections for federal, state, and certain offices like district attorney and in general elections. So that's important to know, and I'm going to say that a couple of times through this training. Okay, another piece of how we used to vote, because single choice plurality elections often result in candidates winning with less than 50% or a majority of the vote, for the offices of mayor, public advocate, and comptroller, we were required to hold a runoff primary election if no candidate receives more than 40% of the total vote. So the important thing to know, and the only thing you need to know, is that ranked choice voting eliminates runoff elections in New York City. It permits the same voters who vote in the primary election to determine the winning candidate without having to return to vote in a separate election. So no more runoff elections. So this is normally where folks ask why the changes were recommended. And so I'm just going to highlight a couple of drawbacks to single choice plurality voting with runoffs. And I always say this too, there are pros and cons to every electoral system. So these were just some of the drawbacks that were identified by advocates looking to implement ranked choice voting. So single choice plurality elections result in less frequent majority support. In a single choice plurality election, a candidate can win with 33% of the vote, which means that 67% of the electorate had no part in electing the winner. So this happens pretty frequently in New York. About 2/3 of borough president and city council primary elections within the last 20 years were won with less than 50% of the vote. And folks identified that as a drawback, and they wanted to implement ranked choice voting so that majority results would happen more frequently. So now on to the drawbacks of runoffs. They have low turnout, they're expensive, and they don't allow full participation. So on the point about being expensive, over the last 20 years, there have been 5 runoff elections. So they don't happen that often, but they happened often enough that people realized they were pretty problematic. So they cost about $20 million to implement each election, and that's including the cost of public funds as well as administration. And they also have low turnout. So the public advocate runoff in 2013, the turnout was 61% less than in the primary. In the 2009 comptroller runoff, it was 35% less. And the 2009 public advocate runoff was 36% less than the primary election. So turnout is a lot lower, and that is the election that would determine the winner. So that was identified as a drawback. The last piece is that military and overseas voters had to turn around their ballots in record time when there was a runoff election. So they frequently, now they can just participate in one election that's on a ranked choice voting ballot. All right, I'm going to pause for questions that have been unaddressed in the Q&A box. Just a reminder, if you want to ask your question verbally, you can use the raise hand function, and we will unmute folks at the end of the training. But if you have a question now, you can type it in the Q&A box. Amanda, do we have any questions?
Hi, Allie. We do not have any questions right now. I think there were just some comments that we're going to address throughout the presentation, so we can head to the next section.
Okay, awesome. And I see someone has a raised hand, so I just want to remind folks again that at the end of the training, we will unmute the folks who have raised their hands for them to ask a question, but feel free throughout the training, as soon as you come up with a question you want to ask, to raise your hand. Mostly so you remember to ask the question, because we want you to remember. Okay, so now we're going to get into the fun stuff. How does ranked choice voting work? Here's the most important information that every voter needs to know. These are the steps for marking a ballot. You pick your first choice candidate and completely fill in the oval next to their name under the first column. If you have a second choice candidate, fill in the oval next to their name under the second column. You can rank up to 5 candidates, but you can still choose to vote for only 1, 2, or 3 candidates if you prefer. It's up to you. It's up to every individual voter to decide for themselves. I will note that ranking fewer candidates does increase your chances of having your ballot exhausted, which I'll describe a little bit more in detail in a bit, but that's just something to look out for. Also, I just wanted to show a ballot where there's more than 5 candidates. So the ballot will show all candidates who qualify for the ballot for that race, but voters can rank a maximum of 5 candidates. So there may be more than 5 candidates who qualify for the ballot. They will all appear on the ballot for that race. You as the voter can only rank a maximum of 5 of them. So a question that I often get is, if there's 8 candidates running, can I rank all 8 candidates? The answer is no, you can only rank 5. That's the maximum. Also, something else to note, which is just basically following the logic of this, the number of ranks available will match the number of candidates running plus 1. So if there's only 3 candidates running, there will be 4 ranks available. And that's to take into consideration a write-in candidate. So you can see in this ballot, to vote for a candidate whose name is not on the ballot, you write the name on the write-in line and fill in an oval to rank your choice. And you can see candidate X is ranked number 1 on this sample ballot here. Okay, another thing I wanted to show, and we were really happy that the Board of Elections sent over a sample ballot that's actually going to be in use in the EDAD for this ballot in the 24th Council special election. So this is an example of the format of the actual ballot, and it also shows English, Spanish, and Bengali. I always point this out here that the languages that are provided on your ballot do vary by election district and assembly district, but every ballot will have English and Spanish. So something to note there. Okay, there are 2 potential ballot marking errors that we want to highlight for voters. And the first has the potential to invalidate your ballot. So it's called overvoting. So we say, do not give multiple candidates the same rank. As you can see on the example ballot, this voter has ranked candidate B and candidate C in the first choice column. It is not clear to me or to the computer that's scanning this ballot what candidate this voter intended to vote for rank 1 because they voted for 2 candidates. This error will invalidate your ballot. I would like to point out that the ballot scanners that the Board of Elections uses will spit the ballot back out if you overvote in this way, and you can complete a new ballot and fill it out correctly. But something to note is if you're filling out your absentee ballot at home and you submit it with this error, it can invalidate your ballot. So please be aware of that. The second error is called duplicate ranking. So I say, do not rank a candidate more than once. So you can see in this example ballot, this voter has ranked candidate B as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There is no benefit to ranking your favorite candidate for multiple rankings. Because of the way that ranked choice voting works, this ballot marking candidate B for all available rankings is virtually the same as just voting for candidate B as number 1. Only your top rank for them will count, and you run the risk of your vote being exhausted. So this is an explanation of exhausted ballots. A voter's ballot is exhausted when all of the candidates a voter ranked have lost, even though 2 or more other candidates remain in the race. And this concept is new as a result of ranked choice voting. So I wanted to give folks a short explanation of it too. Exhausted ballots are more likely in jurisdictions that only allow voters to rank 3 candidates. In New York City, we rank 5. And voters who want to reduce the likelihood of their ballot being exhausted should use all available rankings that they feel comfortable using. So remember, again, a voter's ballot is exhausted when all candidates a voter ranked have lost. So you want to rank as many candidates as possible to reduce the odds of that happening. Okay, so now I'm going to explain the counting process. So in round 1, it's really simple. All first choice votes are counted from every voter's ballot. If a candidate receives more than 50% of those votes, they win. So you can see in this example, candidate B has 54% of the first choice votes. So this candidate wins. However, if no candidate gets more than 50% of first choice votes, and you can see in this example, all 4 candidates have less than 50% of first choice votes, counting will then continue in rounds. Okay, so in each round, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. And I'm going to explain the rest of this process by walking through a single voter's example ballot as shown on the left. So this voter ranked candidate D as her first choice. Candidate D also happens to have the fewest number of votes in this round with only 12%. So candidate D is eliminated. The 12% of voters who chose candidate D in this round have their vote move to the next highest ranked candidate on each of their ballots. Something I always highlight here is not every voter voted for the same second choice as our example voter here. But our example voter voted for candidate C second. So her vote moves to candidate C. You can see the arrows that are indicating that the 12% of voters who voted for candidate D in this round didn't all vote for candidate C. Some of them voted for candidate B or candidate A. So their votes move to whomever they voted for next. This increases the vote totals for candidates A, B, and C. Candidate A gains 4%, candidate B gains 6%, candidate C gains 2%. And that's, if you add that up, that's the totals from the candidate, everyone who voted for candidate D. You can see that there are now those votes that are added in orange to the totals here. Okay, so I think you all see where this is going. In each round, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. Our example voter ranked candidate C as her second choice, as we know. Of the 3 remaining candidates, candidate C now has the fewest number of votes in this round with only 24% of the total. So now candidate C is eliminated. The 24% of voters who chose candidate C in this round have their vote moved to the next highest ranked candidate on each of their ballots. For our example voter, candidate B is ranked 3rd. Her vote moves to candidate B. But like I said, every other voter has their own ballot. So not every voter ranked candidate B for 3rd. Some voters ranked candidate A, and so their vote moves to whomever they voted for next on their ballot. And this increases the vote totals for our 2 remaining candidates, A and B, and the counting process is now over because there are 2 remaining candidates and candidate B wins with 58% of the vote. So something I'll say about this tabulation process is the distribution to the different candidates happens on a computer, same as how election results are added up for single choice elections. There is the added complexity of multiple rounds of shifting votes, but for the voter, they're just completing their own ballot, and the machine does the work of eliminating candidates and distributing votes for the voters who voted for that eliminated candidate. Okay, so I have 4 main takeaways for voters. The first one is you can rank up to 5 candidates, but you do not need to rank a total of 5. It's up to you to decide if you want to rank fewer candidates. If you do rank 5 candidates, 5 votes do not get counted. You always only have 1 active vote at a time. And we saw that in the example as the example voter's ballot moved through candidate D to candidate C to candidate B based on how she voted on her ballot. So if you prefer, you can still vote for just your first choice candidate. However, ranking other candidates does not harm your first choice. Your vote will only be distributed to the next rank on your ballot if that candidate loses. So it's really important to know. And then lastly, ranking multiple candidates ensures your vote will go towards your second, third, fourth, or fifth choice if your top choice is eliminated. So that gives you more say in who wins. It could be that your second or third choice ends up as the winner, and that was a candidate that you preferred over the others that were there. Okay, here's one piece just to look out for to set expectations. So as we saw in 2020, the winner of some races might not be known on election night. And the reason why is because election night, we only have the results from in-person voting. So early voting and election day voting make up the unofficial election totals that the Board of Elections publishes. So it may take a week or longer to count all votes because absentee ballots can be received up to 10 days after an election. And the Board of Elections, of course, wants to count all of those ballots. And it's really important for the ranked choice voting process too, because you need all first choice votes to be tabulated before you go through the tabulation process. Okay, so I mentioned earlier in the training that ranked choice voting is effective as of January 2021. And I just wanted to go over quickly when you will use ranked choice voting in 2021. So if you're a registered voter in Council Districts 24 and 31 in Queens, you'll be using ranked choice voting in those special elections that are happening in February. If you're a registered voter in Council Districts 11 and 15 in the Bronx, you'll be using it in the special elections in March. All New Yorkers registered to a political party that is having a primary election will be able to use it in the primary election in June. And I just wanted to highlight some dates here because the Queens special elections are fast approaching. The Queens District 24 election is taking place on February 2nd, but early voting starts this Saturday, January 23rd, and it goes until Sunday, January 31st. In Queens District 31, the election is taking place on February 23rd, with early voting beginning on February 13th. And for both of the Bronx special elections, they are taking place on March 23rd, with early voting from March 13th to the 21st. And then this is just a preview for folks who don't live in either of those 4 special elections districts, if you're registered to a political party holding a primary, you will use ranked choice voting in the June 22nd primary election. All right, I'm pausing to answer any questions that have been unaddressed in the Q&A box.
We have no questions at this time.
Awesome. Okay, so I think you're starting to realize, why is ranked choice voting voter education important? Well, it's a little complicated, and this training kind of gets into the details of it. But for voters who, if they don't understand how their election system works, they may be discouraged from participating at all, or not understand how to mark a ballot when they get to the polling site. So a strong nonpartisan voter education campaign can help these voters understand how ranked choice voting works, help them make a voting plan, and provide them with voting information so they feel empowered and able to vote. And our goal here is successful outreach, like we saw in Minneapolis, who first implemented ranked choice voting in 2009. So by the time their second mayoral election rolled around in 2017, an overwhelming majority found ranked choice voting simple to use. Almost 100% of the ballots cast were cast validly, and 3/4 of voters ranked multiple choices for mayor, indicating that they understood how the system worked and they were knowledgeable about enough of the candidates that they wanted to rank someone. So this was almost a decade after they first implemented ranked choice voting. So I don't expect at all that we will achieve this level of successful outreach in our first year using ranked choice voting. But this is the goal, right? We're going to be testing, doing exit polling to make sure that voters understand our messaging in order to make sure that we're educating folks in the most effective way possible. So how are we going to educate voters about ranked choice voting? These are our recommendations to make ranked choice voting outreach part of the Get Out the Vote plan. So for special elections, they have high single digit turnout or very low double digit turnout. And enough voters just don't know that the special election is taking place at all. So we're encouraging, and some voters may not even know that we're electing a new mayor this year, and 51 city council seats will be on the ballot. So we're encouraging folks to include ranked choice voting outreach as part of your Get Out the Vote plan, to make sure that voters know to turn out in the first place, and they know that ranked choice voting is going to be used. Campaigns for local office have already started, but most voters don't really tune into the election until 2 to 4 weeks before voting starts. But you can also begin including information about ranked choice voting in your regular communications, just so voters know it's coming up and to be aware of it. And if they want to educate themselves far ahead of time, they can come, of course, to one of our trainings. Okay, so the next piece that we recommend is to keep the approach voter-centric and to use voter-centric language. So one of the voters in our ranked choice voting focus group said, "This is new to me, but it's just another way of voting." And I really liked this, this comment. It really stuck with me. And I think that it shows that voters in New York especially are open and willing to do new things. We saw that last year where more than half of the voters who turned out in the general election used early voting for the first time or used absentee voting. And those were two things that were pretty new last year. So ranked choice voting is something new that's happening this year. The concept of ranking itself is intuitive, but voters need to know what to expect when they get their ballot. So if you think about how often we rank things, if you're looking at a menu, you may want, pepperoni on your pizza, but then they're out of pepperoni. So you go with peppers or whatever your second choice is, your second preference. Obviously, ordering at a restaurant is different from when you're a voter filling out a ballot, because the winner will be your representative in office for, the next 4 years. But the concept is similar. We keep lists and ranked orders in our heads all the time and have preferences that we would prefer over other things. So ranked choice voting is a very similar concept. And then the last piece is voters want to know why this change is happening. So that's why I highlighted that voters themselves voted on this. 74% of New Yorkers voted yes on ranked choice voting. Some folks don't realize that, and it's important to know that this wasn't something that was legislated or, you know, passed by executive order or something like that. Okay, so this next piece is just describing the voter journeys that we have encountered based on our Center for Civic Design research. The Center for Civic Design is an amazing organization that works with government and nonprofits to improve the way that ballots are presented, the way that voter guides look. So they actually worked with the Board of Elections on improving the absentee ballot envelope last year, and it looks really great. But the Center for Civic Design also worked with us on messaging for ranked choice voting. So what we found here is that for every voter, they need to know the basics. How do I fill out a ranked choice voting ballot? Every voter needs to know that. But there's some voters who want to know a little bit more. I have a feeling that you folks on this training are included in at least this group. You want to know, why is ranked choice voting happening? You want to know, why am I filling out more than one choice on the ballot? How does that impact my favorite candidate? And then there are folks who want to know all the details. That's obviously me, and maybe some of you as well. But you want to know, how is my vote tabulated in rounds? You want to know, what are the strategies for voting? So there's different voter journeys. Not everyone is on the same one. And that's why we rely on you folks to ground messaging in what you know about your community. So you know your community best. You know what voter journey they're on. All voters need to know how to fill out their ballot, but not all voters want to know all the details of how the votes get counted and tabulated. That's information that I don't even know right now using single choice elections. So it's up to you to decide that. You're the trusted community voice, and we just recommend that you ground messaging in what you know about your community. So this is a perfect time to transition to talking about how your voter education and outreach campaign will be different for some voters with disabilities, those who use the AutoMark Ballot Marking Device. So here I'm really excited to stop talking and turn it over to Ariel Merkel, the ADA coordinator at the Board of Elections in the City of New York, to go through how the ranked choice voting ballot is different on a ballot marking device and what it looks like, and to also just give you a little bit more information about what her job is at the Board of Elections. So I'm going to go on minimized video.
But Allie, you're going to continue sharing the screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You can go to the next slide, please, Allie. So hello, my name is Ariel Merkel, and I serve, as Allie said, as Americans with Disabilities Act Coordinator for the Board of Elections in the City of New York. I oversee the ADA unit at the BOE, which is an entire unit that is focused on the accessibility of the election process for voters and poll workers with disabilities. We have 3 certified ADA coordinators on staff. And in conjunction with many other departments and units within the BOE, our unit has many challenging and important tasks. So first of all, we ensure the physical poll sites are accessible. New York City has over 1,200 poll sites and nearly 100 early voting sites as of right now, none of which the Board of Elections owns. So we focus on temporary ADA compliance. We deploy temporary ramp equipment to over 600 poll sites, including several temporary vertical platform lifts. And these ramps and other temporary ADA equipment, such as doorbells and cones, are purchased, owned, and maintained by the BOE. We actually have an entire unit, the ramp unit, that oversees the deployment of those ramps. We also provide accommodations for poll workers with disabilities and oversee the accessible voting process, which is why we're here discussing today, which includes an accessible version of the absentee ballot, which is an electronic version of the absentee ballot for voters with print disabilities, such as blind or low vision, individuals who are unable to use a pen, and the ballot marking device, which conducts these same tasks for voters in the poll sites. And obviously, this presentation is going to focus on how ranked choice voting works on the ballot marking device. And I can advance the next slide, please, Allie. Thanks. So the BMD provides voters with disabilities the ability to mark their ballot privately and independently. And every poll site in New York City has at least one BMD. Many large poll sites have two. And the BMD that is used in New York City is the ES&S AutoMark. For those not familiar with AutoMark, it has a lot of features that are helpful to voters and not just voters with disabilities. A very popular feature is the audio assistance, in which the ballot is read aloud to the voter in all languages of that ballot. Many voters choose to use the BMD because it has the capacity also to enlarge the ballot, making it easier to see. And voters can make their selections with a touch screen and not worry, did I fill out the bubble accurately? The AutoMark will actually fill in the bubble for you. And remember that anyone is welcome to use the BMD at the poll site. So here are some of the features of the AutoMark that I'm going to discuss briefly in this presentation. The touch screen and the keypad with Braille, audio assistance in the languages on the ballot, high contrast, zoom for text enlargement, sip and puff, and the rocker paddle. So before we discuss what the BMD does, I want to mention what the BMD does not do. So the BMD simply marks the ballot. It's like a pen, a big, expensive pen. The BMD does not print the ballot. So the voter who enters the poll site has the same ballot that everyone else has. And instead of taking it to the privacy booth to mark it with a pen, they take it to the ballot marking device to have it marked. It is not printing the ballot. It also does not scan the ballot. Once the BMD marks the ballot, the voter takes that marked ballot to the optical scanner. And so again, it is simply marking the ballot. So to go over some of the BMD features, first of all, the touch screen. As I mentioned, the BMD touch screen, voters can navigate the ballot by simply touching the screen. And there is a stylus provided, of course, not just in a time of pandemic. We're all very aware of, sharing touch, high touch locations. And so the stylus is preferred. You're able to use whatever device that you would prefer, but it is responsive to touch. And the image on this slide is the welcome page of the AutoMark. And the BMD, also the keypad to the right of the screen, has Braille on it. So in addition to navigating through it by touching the screen, a voter can actually navigate through the ballot by touching these various keypads on the various buttons on the keypad, apologies. And again, those are in Braille. And the image on this slide is the keypad of the AutoMark. And voters who prefer to hear the ballot read aloud to them can listen to the entire ballot and all the languages that are on that specific ballot. Again, if your ballot is not in Bengali, it's not going to appear in Bengali on the AutoMark. But if your ballot is in Bengali, then that will have an audio file for that language. The BOE provides headphones with disposable covers, but voters are also welcome to use their own headphones if they prefer. The audio will only work if you are actually inserting into the headphone jack. I will play a video later in which I actually plugged in a speaker, but that is not the situation in a poll site. It won't read your selections aloud unless you are actually plugged into the headphone jack. Voters can adjust the volume and the tempo of the audio, and the BMD also has a screen button in which the voter can select, and that will darken the whole screen so no one can see you going through the ballot as you're listening to it. And again, the image on this slide is the language selection screen of the AutoMark. The text is black and on blue boxes with a white background. And this is the BMD rocker paddle. So I think that there was one slide that is missing here of the high contrast. There is a high contrast feature in which the screen would appear black in the background with white text. And that screen is high contrast for individuals who that is a preferable way for them to view the ballot. But moving on to the rocker paddle. The rocker paddle has two buttons, one on the left and one on the right. The button on the left is the no button, which also scrolls through the contests. And the button on the right is the yes button that makes the selection. Both of these buttons have braille. The rocker paddle can be held, placed in the voter's lap, or placed on the floor, and the voter may push these buttons with their feet, hands, or any other body parts. And the image on this screen is the rocker paddle being held in front of the AutoMark. And an additional feature is the sip and puff device, which is a mouthpiece that voters can use to navigate and mark their ballots. A sip is a short inhaling breath through the straw, and puffs are short exhaling breaths. The voter can use their own sip and puff device, or there is a sterile device provided by the BOE. The image on the slide, there are two images on the slide. The top is a photo of a voter with a mouthpiece of the sip and device in his mouth, and the bottom image is that same voter looking at the AutoMark screen as he uses the device. So for many of you, all of this information is what you already understand because it's how you currently vote. But how does the AutoMark display a ranked choice ballot, which is why you're here? On paper, the ranked choice appears as a screen. I don't know if you can see the sample. It appears as a grid. I apologize. The ranked choice ballot is a grid visually. On the BMD, each choice is a separate screen. And if you only remember one thing from this presentation, please remember this, that when a ranked choice ballot is inserted into the AutoMark, each choice is a separate screen. So the image on the screen is the first choice for mayor. It states on the top, mayor choice 1 of 5, vote for 1, followed by a list of candidates and a write-in option. On this screen, the voter will select their first choice candidate. Once they select that first choice, they will click the next button or select the next button. And you will see the second screen, and that states mayor choice 2 of 5, vote for 1, followed by the list of candidates. On this screen, the voter will select their second choice. So again, each choice, first choice, second choice, third choice, are separate screens on the AutoMark. When the voter selects a candidate, the name is highlighted in yellow and a check appears next to the name. If a voter changes their mind and selects another candidate, the first candidate is no longer highlighted. This is how they prevent overvoting. This is how the AutoMark prevents overvoting. I'll show a brief video of that in a minute. And this image on the slide is a touchscreen of the AutoMark with the candidate Tegan Kelly, all these are fake names, selected as the choice for mayor. If the voter chooses a write-in candidate, a keyboard pops up on the screen. And that's what the image on this slide shows. Many voters who are writing in a candidate prefer to use the BMD because it prints legibly and you don't have to worry about, well, are they going to be able to read my handwriting? On this screen, I typed in John Doe, and when I select as the write-in candidate, and when I select OK, John Doe appears as my first choice candidate for mayor. The image on this slide is the touch screen of the AutoMark with the write-in candidate, John Doe, selected as the first choice of mayor. And before it actually marks the ballot, the BMD provides a confirmation page with the voter's selections. So the voter can double check their selections. And if the voter is able to go back and make any changes before the BMD marks their ballot. The image on this slide is the ranked choice voting ballot marked by the BMD. On this example, my write-in, John Doe, is printed as my first choice candidate for mayor. Tegan Kelly is selected as my second choice. Emerson Brooks as my third choice. Oba White as my fourth choice. And Jess Allen as my fifth choice. And remember, the AutoMark just marks the ballot. It doesn't print or scan it. When it marks the selections on the ballot, you can see that the BMD doesn't make a perfect oval. It's and this is done on purpose. So the marked ballot is not easily identifiable as a ballot that was marked by the BMD. So I've created a few videos of just the production of these clips is very much pandemic quality. I apologize that they aren't more polished. And I will try to share those now. Bear with me.
This is our first time ever sharing a video in a ranked choice voting training. So this is like, be generous with us, folks.
Edge technology. Okay, hold on one moment. Okay, can you see this video?
Oops.
Is this visible?
Yes, this is visible to me. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was muted or not. Actually, I can see your whole screen, not just the video screen.
Oh dear. Okay.
There you go. Now I see the video.
Hold on one moment. I'm going to stop sharing to see why this isn't playing. I apologize for this. Why my connectivity seems to be compromised at the moment. I'm going to just start the video again. So while that is booting up, I just want to again explain that I used speakers in this video, and the BMD does not read your choices out loud unless a headphone is plugged in. I don't know why I'm not able to access this.
You know what? We can also just allow the videos of how it works to be shared in our public folder if folks want to be able to view it after the training too, if we can't get it to work.
Okay, let me try one more time.
Okay, I can see it.
Okay. So this is me inserting the RCV ballot. It's a sample ballot. So again, with the fake names, you see that it's listed in all of the languages of this ballot. I am inserting the speakers into the headphone jack, selecting English. And turning up the volume. So now you're experiencing what someone would hear if their headphones were plugged in.
Once you have made your selections, you can review your selections and then choose to have your ballot marked.
I'm demonstrating the high contrast option, in which it's white text on black background. And I'm now showing the zoom feature. And now I'll stop talking over the video.
There are 4 vertical keys to the right of the arrow keys. The bottom toggle key will adjust audio volume. The next toggle key will adjust the speed of the synthesized speech. The round button will repeat the last spoken phrase. Holding the round button until there is a beep will pause the audio. Tapping the round button again will resume the audio. The top diamond key will turn the display screen on or off for privacy. Pressing the right arrow key will move to the next contest. Pressing the left arrow key will move to the previous contest. Pressing the down arrow key will move to the next candidate or choice within a contest. Pressing the up arrow key will move to the previous candidate. When you hear the name of the candidate or choice that you wish to select, press the square select key in the center of the arrow keys. For an election official who exit without marking your ballot, press the diamond-shaped screen button 4 times in a row. Press the right arrow key now to hear the first contest. Press the round repeat key to hear these instructions again. Next contest. Mayor choice 1 of 5. Vote for 1. There are 6 choices. Use the down arrow key to hear the name of each candidate or choice you have selected. Open white. You have now fully voted this contest. You have selected Tegan
You
Kelly.
see, when I select a
have now
second
fully
candidate,
voted
the
this
first
contest.
candidate is
Press the right
unselected.
arrow. You have chosen to input a write-in candidate. Use the up and down arrows on the keypad to scroll through the letters. Use the select key to select a letter. Hyphen, space and backspace appear after the Z. Use backspace to remove a letter. At any time, you can press the round repeat key to hear the letters you have selected so far. When you are finished, press the right arrow key to return to the contest and select this write-in candidate. To cancel and return to the contest without selecting this write-in candidate, press the left arrow key. Press the down arrow now to begin moving through the alphabet. Capital J, capital Q, backspace, capital O, capital H, capital N, space, capital D, capital O, capital E. You have selected capital J, capital O, capital H, capital N, space, capital D, capital O, capital E. You have now fully voted this contest.
So I will just show a brief video of what the stylus looks like. Can you see this again, or do I have to redo it?
I can see it.
Okay, so this is an example of the stylus that is provided for those who don't want to use the touch screen.
If you wish to
And this
mark
is
your
the
ballot
last
again,
stage
press
when the
square
ballot is
select
actually
key.
being
Your
marked.
ballot will be marked in accordance with your selections and returned to you for deposit into a tabulator or ballot box. If your ballot is now being processed, your ballot will now be returned to you for insertion into the tabulator or ballot box. Please wait. Please remove your ballot and deposit it into the.
You can see John Doe as the first candidate and all of the other selections. The ovals are not entirely perfect. And then one last video, I just want to demonstrate the rocker paddle. So the no button, the scroll is scrolling through all of the candidates, and then the options at the bottom of the screen. And then the right yes button is the selection. And those are my very low budget videos done here in our office with our AutoMark. We do have a little bit more polished videos about the ballot marking device that is just a bit too long and is not RCV specific, but I'll share that in the chat so people can watch. Oh, I don't know why it's still playing.
So I just posted the link you gave me, Ariel.
Okay, perfect.
All right, let's see if we can swap screen share. This is another thing we've never done.
Do I need to stop, or you can just take over, right?
Yeah, I think I just took over. Can you
Okay.
see
Yeah.
my screen? Cool. All right, successful.
So the last thing that I wanted to mention is that this brief overview of how RCV works on the BMD. a part of that we just explained here is also all this information is on a flyer that we have created. The BOE created these flyers explaining this process and emphasizing again that each choice is a separate screen. These flyers are going to be at the BMD in the upcoming elections and are available in the 5 languages that we support and are also available in Braille. So the image on this slide is the visual of the flyer translated in English, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, and Bengali, and they will also be available in Braille. So that concludes my segment of this presentation.
Sorry, folks. Got a little click happy. So we're pausing for questions now. I noticed that there are a few questions. Amanda, do you want to read them aloud to Ariel or I to answer?
Yeah, sure. And I know we have a few questions at the end from folks who may want to raise their hand. But earlier we did get a question about Russian interpretation or lack thereof at the poll sites. So I'll just reiterate what Ariel said. Both the Board of Elections and the Campaign Finance Board actually provide language translation and assistance in the Voting Rights Act covered languages. So that is Spanish, Chinese, Korean, and Bengali. You know, for additional languages, there are interpreters at select poll sites that are made available by the Civic Engagement Commission under the city charter. So we're happy to follow up with people on that afterwards and connect people to the Civic Engagement Commission as well. But again, those interpreters are at select poll sites and can just help voters understand the information that's in their ballot and the process to vote. All right, we also got some pretty quick questions to answer, but if one person had this question, I bet other people do as well. So this is a question for Allie, or I can take this too. Will district attorney races be on the same page, the same ballot page, or on a separate page? So that's a pretty easy question. Ranked choice voting races are on one side of the ballot, and races that are not ranked choice voting races are on the other side of the ballot. So if you are, you know, a voter in Brooklyn or Queens and Brooklyn or Manhattan, and you're going to have a DA race on the ballot in the June primary, that'll be on a separate side of the ballot than the races for mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, and city council.
If you'd like, I can actually share an example of that.
That would be great.
Yeah, we would love that. Should I stop sharing?
Yeah, just for a minute. Let me see if I can. So you can see this ballot. Can you see this? So on this first page is the ranked choice. And again, this is a sample ballot. So these are not, this is not a real contest. I mean, it's not real candidates. You'll see on the mayor, you have, you know, 5 choices, public advocate, 5 choices. I'm scrolling down, comptroller, city council has multiple choices. And then that is the first, that is one side of the page, and then you flip it over. And you have members of state committee, judicial convention, which are not ranked choice. So if that visual is helpful.
Awesome. That's the first time I've seen this too. That's so fun. So Kathy's asking what the size of the typeface is on the sample ballot. And I know with the Voter-Friendly Ballot Act, the size was increased to a minimum of size 9, I believe. Ariel, I don't know if you know that.
I don't know. I mean, regarding the sample ballot, this is something that we only use for training purposes. So as we're marking it, we're not actually marking a real candidate's name. So I don't have that information handy, but I can get back to you, Kathy.
I do just want to remind people, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A box as opposed to chat, because it's easier for us to track them there and figure out what we've answered and what we still have to answer. So since you showed the ballot, and this was really well timed for this question, someone asked, Michael asked, what will the ballot look like if there are more than 5 candidates, and will people think they can vote for more choices? My answer, and maybe we could just like pull up an example of the ballot again. My answer would be the candidate list gets longer, but you still only have 5 columns to choose, you know, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth choice.
Yeah, Allie had a great screen earlier in the presentation that showed, you know, I don't know, 13, 17 candidates, but there's only 5 choices. I think that she's clicking back now.
Here we go. Sorry, that was really, really far away in the presentation because this is a lot longer than it normally is. So this is what the ballot looks like for if there's more than 5 candidates. You still only get 5 choices. You can only rank a maximum of 5 on the grid ballot. This is what it looks like. And on the BMD, you would just, instead of having screens 1 of 5, sorry, you'll have screens 1 of 5, but instead of showing the grid, it'll just be all the candidates listed on each of those screens. So you can have, you know, however many candidates have made the ballot in each race would appear on each of those selection screens on the BMD.
All right. Speaking of the BMD, Zach asks if the BMD can read back write-in candidates. So if someone like chooses a candidate who's not listed, how does the BMD treat that?
It reads each letter. So for John Doe, it'll say capital J, O, H, N, space, D, O, E. And that's to make sure that you're spelling it correctly.
Yeah, that was in the video too. I didn't know it did that either. So I was like, that's great.
Zach mentioned that the answer to his question was in the video. I think it's always worth going over questions again, just in case, to really reiterate for people, because sometimes we're thinking of other things as we're going through a presentation. Okay, so Helen had a question, and again, we're going to be sending out a bunch of follow-up materials via email after this is over, including these great resources that Ariel is sharing. But we did have a question from Helen if the BMD explainer flyer is available online for organizations to share.
It is not currently available online. It's still in production. We are in the midst of, you know, preparing for early voting starting on Saturday. But I can talk to our communications director to see if that is possible to put that on our website.
We'll be following up with all of you with that information. All right, Allie, we have a couple outstanding questions that I see that you would like to answer live.
Oh yeah, sorry. Sorry, I began encroaching on the Q&A box while Ariel was showing her video. But I actually think that this question was addressed by the video that Ariel showed. So does the choice that a person made for 1 get eliminated on the second screen on the BMD? And Ariel, you showed on the video, I don't know, I'll just let you answer this question.
Right, I think that I just want to clarify, and Allie did discuss it, but I just want to reiterate the difference between overvoting and duplicate ranking, because I've gotten a couple emails from various people as well that kind of conflate these two. So again, overvoting invalidates your ballot. That is if you're voting for both Allie and Ariel for choice 1. You can't. You have to make a choice of who your choice 1 is. However, if you want to vote for Ariel choice 1, choice 2, choice 3, that is duplicate ranking. That does not invalidate your ballot. Your ballot will be received by the scanner. As Allie mentioned earlier, it's more likely that it will become exhausted. So if in this example, Ariel does not get 51% plus 1 of the vote, and it goes to round 2, that ballot would become exhausted, but it doesn't mean it's invalidated. So again, overvoting is prevented in this system, but you are able to duplicate rank. Legally, you are able to duplicate rank and the system will permit it. It's just the Campaign Finance Board is explaining why you may or may not want to do that. But from the Board of Elections perspective, you have the capacity to do that, if that helps clarify that.
Yeah, I always describe it as like you can do it, but should you?
Yeah, and
It's allowable, but you might not want to do it.
and from the Board of Elections perspective, we're not in a position to advise people, you know, how to mark their ballot. However, but we do want to clarify when it would become invalidated. And again, overvoting invalidates, but duplicate ranking does not invalidate your ballot. Did I answer the question?
I think
Yeah.
it did, yes, including a follow-up question. Allie, did that also address this other question from Helen? When a voter, will the candidate that a voter chooses as their first choice be eliminated as an option for their second choice, and so on? I think that is maybe also getting.
Yeah, the question from Lindsay and the question from Helen were basically the same question, just rephrased.
Yeah, if you can mark those as done, that would be great.
Whoops.
And then Zach had a question of, will information about ranked choice voting be posted at poll sites? And maybe Ariel, you're best positioned to answer that.
Yes, so in addition to the flyer that is specifically about the BMD that our unit created, there is a palm card that is being handed out in the poll site with the ballot. So you'll get the ballot and a palm card explaining ranked choice voting. And there will also, this palm card is actually blown up as a poster that will also be in the poll sites, including early voting poll sites.
Those are the questions for now. And again, for anyone who has their hand raised, we will come back to you at the end of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, I just need a couple minutes to catch up on where, where we are in the presentation. All right. Fabulous. Okay, so next up, we are going to talk about how to communicate with voters. So something that we found was that voters, when we talk to them about ranked choice voting, want to know why the change happened. And sorry, I just realized I'm not on video. Okay, now I am. Voters want to know why the change happened, and they kind of need to be reminded of what ways ranked choice voting was identified by advocates as being a benefit to voters. So we want to encourage folks to use ranked choice voting. We don't want them to be afraid of it. And so these are the 3 points that we tested talking to voters about, and they really resonated with voters. They want to know why this change took place, that it didn't just happen for no reason. And so this is the 3 reasons that advocates have pointed to for moving from single choice to ranked choice voting. Number 1, voters have more say in who gets elected. Number 2, candidates are more likely to appeal to a wider audience. And number 3, voters elect more diverse candidates. And all 3 of these points have been identified as strengths of ranked choice voting in the jurisdictions that have implemented ranked choice voting. So that's what I can say my caveat is. It hasn't been used yet in New York, so I can't guarantee to you that all 3 of these things will definitely happen, but this is what folks have seen in other ranked choice voting jurisdictions. So one thing I just want to contextualize is, why does this messaging work? So I mentioned our research has shown us that voters understand ranked choice voting and majority winners after a basic explanation. They like the idea that many candidates will focus on appealing to them, and they value the diversity of New York City, and they want representatives who look like the city they represent. And so just to get into a little bit more detail for kind of like the sub points for each of these sections, but you have more say in who gets elected. Even if your top choice does not win, you can still help choose who does. You can vote for your top choice first without worrying about who is likely to win. So that's the piece about how voters don't have to vote as strategically or decide between voting for their favorite candidate and the one that's most electable. They can vote for their favorite candidate first, their second favorite candidate second, their third favorite candidate third, and they don't have to choose just one. So candidates are more likely to appeal to a wider audience. And again, this is through experience looking at ranked choice voting elections. It's just candidates can't win only with the support of their base. So voters hear from more candidates who are not only campaigning for first choice votes, but also second, third, and fourth and fifth choice votes. So they want to appeal to a wider audience. They may talk about issues that weren't identified by issues that their base cares about, but issues that, you know, slightly outside of their base, they're outside of their target audience appeal to. And what that means in other jurisdictions is that this has also led to more civility and less negativity between candidates. In some instances, like-minded candidates for the same office have even, and I'm putting this in quotes because this isn't actually what they're doing, but they've endorsed one another. They'll say, vote for me first, but vote for my colleague for second. Or if you're voting for my colleague first, please consider voting me for second. I think that's really interesting, and it's definitely a change in tone from what we're used to in New York. So this is mainly just identifying for voters that the candidates who speak to you, if you do speak to them, may be talking to you in a way that's different from what you're used to. Okay, so in RCV cities, elected officials have, voters have elected more diverse candidates to be their officials. So in the first year implementing ranked choice voting, Minneapolis elected its first 2 transgender council members. 7 cities that use ranked choice voting have achieved or surpassed gender parity in their city legislature. That means that more than 50% of the folks in the city legislature are women or identify as women. And in the 13 largest municipalities that use ranked choice voting, 6 have women mayors and 4 have Black, Latino, or Asian mayors. So what they've found in, especially the cities in the Bay Area of California that have implemented ranked choice voting, more women candidates and women candidates of color get elected pretty much across the board. So that's something that we just highlight for folks. Voters really like hearing about this because, like I said, they like to think of New York as being a really diverse place. They're proud of New York. And in the city council, I think we've seen major strides in electing a legislature that looks like the folks that are voting for that legislature, which is amazing. But we also know, and voters know this too, that at the citywide level for mayor, public advocate, comptroller, there hasn't been as much diversity in the elected officials represented there. Okay, so now for voter education next steps. We have a slide here that just describes the key takeaways for all of you folks on this call. After this training, we have a couple of, a checklist for you to complete here if you feel comfortable. So we want you to review the materials that we're going to share with you in our follow-up email and get comfortable talking about ranked choice voting. We want you to plan outreach for 2021 special primary and general elections. Take our voter-facing ranked choice voting in New York City presentation and customize it for your audience. So in the follow-up email, you'll get a link to our voter-facing training that is basically just a shorter version of this training that you can use. It's free for use, everyone can use it. And you can use our slides to create your own presentation and customize it. And we can also help you with that. So if you do that, you do not need to conduct 20 trainings with your members or constituents. You can just do 1 or 2, that's fine. But we think it's really important to have a number of different people out there talking about ranked choice voting so that, we really do view this as kind of like an all hands on deck thing. This is a major change in how elections take place in New York, and we want everyone to be aware of it. There's more than 4.5 million registered voters in New York. That's a lot of people, and we want to make sure we reach as many of them as possible. So we also would like for you to incorporate ranked choice voting into your Get Out the Vote plan and start about a month before the election. Like I said, voters really don't tune into the election until it's literally happening, like the day before early voting starts most of the time. But we want folks to start a month before the election just to get it as a part of the conversation. And then the last piece is to check New York City and, oh my goodness, NYC Votes emails and social media for more resources. Okay, you can always go to our website for resources about ranked choice voting information. Our general voting information website is voting.nyc, but we also have a specific website that hosts our ranked choice voting content, as well as an FAQ page for ranked choice voting. And we are adding more things to our website pretty much every week. So if you go to these sites, you'll be able to see all of the resources we have available. We also promote them very heavily on social media. So you can follow on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at NYC Votes. I also, oh boy, the link has grayed out for this ADA information, which I need to make sure that my computer stops doing this. But I will send these links around in our follow-up email. We have, the Board of Elections has a really good ADA information page for voters with disabilities. There's also a ballot marking device video that goes through some of the things that Ariel was showing earlier, but really in depth. And then they also host really good special elections information for the upcoming 2021 special elections in Queens and the Bronx. The Board of Elections also has a poll site locator where you can, about a month ahead of the election taking place, you can find your poll site where you've been assigned for early voting, and also find a sample ballot that will include also all of the languages that are supported in your election district, assembly district. So that's great. And then you can also follow them on Twitter and Instagram at BOE NYC. Okay, this is our contact information for myself and Amanda, but I also included Ariel's email address, which I hope is okay with her. All right, and this is the end of our slideshow. And we can now take questions from folks who have their hands raised.
We do have one question in the Q&A. And again, we've gotten a lot of questions about like, when will these materials be available? How will we know they're going to be available? We're going to send emails as materials become available. So rest assured, once it's ready, you will know. This is a question for Ariel. Are the BMD videos available in other languages? All right, maybe we can come back to, there you are.
Oh, Ariel, you're muted.
I was frozen. I was frozen. You didn't hear anything that I said?
No.
Okay. The BMD video that I just showed is literally just something I took on my iPhone of the AutoMark in our office. But the AutoMark, again, if you select a different language, would read in those languages. And so there was I wasn't speaking in that video. So unfortunately, I don't have it captioned. I don't have anything else like that.
All right. I know Christopher has also had his hand raised throughout the presentation. This is the time at the end where we can unmute folks. So Christopher, I'm unmuting you now for your question.
Thank you. First of all, I want to compliment Ariel for one thing, because Ariel is a good example for accessibility, because I did do I'm sorry, I'm blanking, the ballot. And I have to say, it's very ADA friendly. It was easier for me to do it. And then I could just put it at the Board of Elections. So it's easier for poll workers. And I think we need to focus more on the poll workers. Instead of them going downtown or wherever they are in the 5 boroughs, that ballot should be available right to their email. It will save stamps. So I want to put that compliment out for Ariel as well. The one thing I just want to remind you that where I live in that part of Brooklyn, which is part of 45th and 46th Assembly districts, we're not really that red. It's like the problem is you have a lot of Russian, you have other languages there, and they did do the 2020 censors because we've been working with 2020 censors to make sure people did do it. So if I was everyone to be on alert to check the 2020 censors, because a lot of the Russian community do have the right to vote as well. And I'm not, picking on, I just want to make sure a fair vote, a fair election. I believe in love and peace and strong on that. So can we please not put a lot of parts of the borough, its language barrier lacking, And I'm glad we're seeing those signs are going up for the ballot marking device, but we need more advertising about the ballot marking device. Ariel knows what I'm talking about because a lot of people think it's a nothing machine and people think it's going to blow up, which I had to explain this at where I was doing it, and a lot of people are using it. Instead of getting 5 people using it, I had 379 people using it, and now they're in love with it. So there's my good news, my bad news, and all the information. And I did enjoy this very much.
Thank you.
We're really glad to hear that.
Well, I'm not going to be like everyone else, going to kill. I'm not yelling person. I'm a love and peace and love. But there is a time to pick on. There's a time to get something accomplished, and we definitely need to work on the accessibility and the language barrier. 1000%.
And I think, Amanda, you touched on the language earlier, right? Or was it Allie?
I think it was
You're
Allie.
muted. You're muted, both of you.
I touched on it earlier, yes. But,
One thing that I'll also mention, this is something that I just recently discovered. I think that the poll site locator that the Board of Elections hosts is an amazing tool because if you put in your address, you can actually view your sample ballot that you will see when you go into the poll site, and it will show the exact languages that are offered on your ballot too. I thought that was awesome.
And it also has not only your election day, but your early voting poll site, which again, I want to stress is most likely not your same location. Most people have a different site for the early voting and your election day sites, and the early voting hours sometimes shift a bit, and so that poll site locator will tell you for that specific election where your election day poll site is, and you know, the hours of that don't change, and then your early voting site and the hours for that, as well as your sample ballot. So you can practice. You can say, you can, you know, print it out, and it says sample, so you can't like print it out and take it to the poll site and put it in the scanner. It's not going to accept it, but you can print it out and practice. You know, I want, you know, Allie for 1, Amanda for 2, Ariel for 3, and you know, so when you're in the poll site, you're not, you know, doing it for the first time.
I'm going to call on Kathy because I know she has a question.
Yes, first of all, thank you all for doing this. I just have one is a question and one is an observation that I've been learning from my colleagues who are blind and visually impaired. First, my question is, I know you mentioned about some kind of, I don't know, pamphlet or flyer for about how the BMD will work with ranked choice voting. And you said you're going to be giving out at the polling sites a little card to people about ranked choice voting. But what about people who are disabled or even just want to use the BMD? How will they get that other piece of information at the voting locations, at the polling sites that don't come to seminars and things like that?
So good to hear from you again. Am I unmuted? No, I'm okay. So just to clarify, there's 2 different informational flyers, palm cards in the poll site. One is going to all voters. Okay, so one is going to all voters with their ballot, explaining, you know, that this ballot looks a little different. There's a grid here, and that will explain. I unfortunately don't have it handy right this moment, but that is going to explain ranked choice voting at large. And again, that is going to be a big poster that is available. What is on your screen right now is specifically for the ballot marking device, and those flyers will be in the BMD itself, and all of this information will be available in Braille. So this is similar information as what is in the flyer. It's just, instead of saying on the grid, I changed the words to the first screen, the second screen. It's essentially the same, it's substantially the same content. It's just making the language specific to the BMD.
Okay,
So,
quick follow-up on that. When you say, okay, it will be in Braille and also in regular writing. But what about a person who doesn't read Braille, who's blind, and won't be able to read that? Will it also be on the BMD that they can listen to it?
No, the BMD only reads the ballot. It doesn't have, it doesn't read.
So they got a
additional-
problem, because if they don't read Braille and they don't have visual sight to see your little pamphlet, I hate to say it, but it's then worthless to them at that
Yeah,
point.
and again, there are poll workers. There's a BMD inspector who will be available, a bipartisan.
But how would they know that I mean, you're coming in and you're blind, and you don't even know, you're first trying to navigate your way to the BMD itself. And then you're going to need somebody to explain things to you, how you're going to let them know that, hey, I need help when there's, all the ruckus I know in the voting site, it's pretty, a little bit mayhem, you hear all the noise. How are they going to be able to flag down somebody? Or will somebody be actually standing there the whole time that will say, do you need assistance? Do you need the entire time? I mean,
Yes, there is someone assigned to the BMD. There's a specific poll worker position called BMD inspector. And that person is on standby to assist the voter with anything. And if they do need assistance with actually marking their ballot, there is a bipartisan team that will come and assist. But there is someone standing next to the BMD assigned.
that actually will be able to read that pamphlet to them.
Mhm.
So that they can understand it.
Correct.
And what if they have what if they have a language barrier? Then what do they do?
So we have, if the ballot in that specific district is in multiple languages, there are interpreters stationed in the poll site who speak those languages. So in my poll site, my ballot is
Right.
in English, Spanish, and Chinese. So when I go to vote at my poll site, there is a Spanish interpreter and a Chinese interpreter assigned to that poll site.
I
So
guess
there is, I'm sorry?
So, okay, there is somebody. So here's a question. What if it's a person, like say, at your poll site speaks Russian? Do they have some way that they can like zoom in somebody from another poll site that can read the flyer to them or something?
I think
I'm
that that's
just
a
curious.
question more for the civic engagement,
Okay.
who is expanding language access. The Board of Elections is,
Right.
abiding by the 5 covered languages
Sure.
currently by the law, but there are other agencies that are providing support in multiple languages. So when it comes to a language that not even they support, I think that that's a question for them to.
Okay, so I'll run that by Ali. When you have time, can you give me that contact person and we can talk to them?
Kathy,
about that?
I'm more than happy to
That'd be
do
great.
that. I just want to be mindful of everybody else's time
Yeah.
because it is
Just
now
one other
one.
really quick thing. When you're doing these presentations, like when you showed that thing about, the different counties and how people felt about this,
Mhm.
you should like give a little description so people who can't read the screen know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so what I
learning
found, and
that
this,
too.
I'm just going to shout out Helen at Disability Rights New York for approving my alt text on all of those images in the PDF version of the presentation, because describing what all of the colors means takes a very, very long time. And so that's why I've been distributing the PDF before that, but
Okay,
I will
great.
definitely take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm learning too.
Yep, exactly. This has been a huge learning process for me. I want to thank everyone for coming to this training. First of all, I'm reminding everyone that it has been recorded and it will be posted to the CFB website. I want to thank Ariel for showing up and showing us what the ballot marking device looks like. I have learned so much from Ariel in the past 2 weeks alone. So I'm so thankful that she joined us to share her expertise with all of you too. And again, thank you so much for attending, and look for our follow-up email with more information. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Allie.